The story you're about to hear is one that will stay with you long after it ends. Welcome to Heart of the Guardians, where love, destiny, and humanity find their voice. If you believe that miracles can still happen in the most unexpected places, then this story is for you. It all began on a quiet morning in 1893, in a small town in Kansas. The post office was unusually busy that day, dozens of men waiting impatiently for letters that might change their lives forever. Among them stood Daniel Reed, a man of few words, known more for his silence than his smile. Daniel was a rancher. His land stretched for miles, but his home felt empty. He had lost his wife 3 years earlier during childbirth. Since then, his heart had built a wall too high for anyone to climb. Yet something deep inside told him that maybe, just maybe, he could start again. That's when he found the advertisement: mail-order brides from the East, honest, God-fearing women seeking good men for a new life. Daniel hesitated for weeks before writing his first letter. He was honest about his loneliness, his loss, and his quiet dreams of raising a family again. He didn't expect an answer, but one day it came, a letter from a woman named Clara Evans. Her handwriting was neat but full of warmth. She told him about her life in New York, her love for reading, and her longing to escape a past she didn't talk much about. Daniel felt something stir in his heart again. They wrote to each other for months. And finally, Clara agreed to come west and be his wife. The train arrived one cold morning. Daniel stood waiting on the platform, his hat in hand, his heart pounding harder than it had in years. When Clara stepped off the train, he froze. She was beautiful, not in the polished, city way, but in the kind of beauty that comes from pain, strength, and hope. But there was something else. Clara wasn't alone. By her side, holding tightly to her hand, was a small boy, maybe 3 years old. Daniel's heart dropped. He looked at her, then at the child. She saw his confusion and whispered, "I'll explain." They went to the edge of the platform where no one could hear. Clara's eyes were filled with fear. "Daniel," she said softly, "I should have told you sooner. This is my son, Samuel. His father, he abandoned us before Samuel was born. I didn't want to lie, but I was afraid. So I came here hoping you'd still want me." Daniel didn't say a word. The silence between them stretched painfully. Then he put his hat back on, nodded once, and turned away. That night, Clara sat in a small inn on the edge of town, holding Samuel as he slept. She had no money, no friends, and nowhere to go. The innkeeper had already told her she could only stay one more night. She wept quietly, whispering to her boy, "I'm sorry, my love." Mama thought she found us a home. Across town, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept pacing the floor, thinking about her eyes, about the way that little boy clung to her hand. But his pride, his fear of being hurt again, kept him from going to her. The next morning, Daniel went to his barn, trying to drown his thoughts in work. But his heart wouldn't rest. When he saw a pair of muddy footprints outside his fence, he knew who they belonged to. Clara had left town at dawn, walking down the long dirt road leading east. He stood there for a moment, then threw down his tools and took his horse. He found them after 2 miles, Clara struggling to carry Samuel, the child crying from the cold. Daniel rode up beside them and dismounted. He didn't say a word at first. He just took off his coat and wrapped it around the boy. Then, quietly, he said, "You'll both freeze out here. Get on the horse." Clara hesitated, but he held out his hand. When she placed her hand in his, something shifted, a silent promise neither of them understood yet. He brought them home. For the first few days, the silence was heavy. Daniel worked outside while Clara cooked and cared for Samuel. At night, she slept in the spare room, the child curled up beside her. But slowly, something began to change. One evening, as Daniel was fixing a fence, Samuel ran up to him, laughing. "Mr. Daniel, look, I caught a frog." Daniel smiled for the first time in months. The boy's laughter was contagious, and when Clara saw them together, her heart ached, not from pain this time, but from something new. Over the next weeks, the ranch came alive again. Samuel followed Daniel everywhere, calling him Sir at first, then just Dan. Clara's laughter returned too, soft and unsure at first, but growing with every sunset they shared. One evening, a storm rolled in. The wind howled, and rain lashed the windows. Samuel woke up crying, terrified by the thunder. Daniel rushed to his room and found the boy shaking. He scooped him up and said gently, "You're safe, son." Clara, standing at the door, froze when she heard that word, son. After the storm passed, she found Daniel sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. "You didn't have to say that," she whispered. Daniel looked up. "I didn't mean to," he said quietly. "It just came out." Clara smiled faintly. "He's starting to think of you that way." Daniel sighed. "And you, what do you think of me?" Clara looked into his eyes. "I think, you're the kindest man I've ever met." From that night on, something unspoken bound them together. Daniel began to see Clara not as the woman who deceived him, but as someone who had fought her way through life for her child. He admired her strength, her gentleness, her quiet courage. Spring came, and with it, a new chapter. One Sunday morning, Daniel hitched the wagon and took Clara and Samuel to church. The townsfolk stared, whispers followed them like shadows. A mail-order bride who was already pregnant, and a rancher who took her in. It was scandalous, but Daniel didn't care. During the service, Samuel tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "Can I call you Papa now?" Daniel's throat tightened. He nodded, and tears filled his eyes. "Yeah, son," he said softly. "You can." From that day forward, Daniel treated Samuel as his own. He taught him to ride, to fish, to pray. And when Clara saw them together, her heart overflowed. Months later, one evening as the sun set behind the hills, Daniel came inside, his hands rough from work, his eyes soft. Clara was washing dishes. Samuel was asleep in the corner. Daniel stood there for a long moment, then said quietly, "Clara, I made a mistake when you first came here. I let my fear speak louder than my heart. But if you'll still have me, I'd like to make this home yours. Not as a promise on paper, but as a promise for life." Clara turned, tears in her eyes. "Daniel, I thought you'd never ask." They married a week later under a tree on the ranch. The preacher said it was the simplest wedding he'd ever done. Just 2 rings, 1 vow, and a boy who kept asking if he could blow the horn after the "I do." Years passed. Samuel grew tall and strong, taking over the ranch one day. He never once called Daniel anything other than father. And every time someone asked if Daniel was his real dad, Samuel would smile and say, "He's the only one that ever was." As for Daniel and Clara, their love never faded. They grew old together, sitting on that same porch every evening, watching the sun go down, holding hands like they did the day he found her on that dusty road. Sometimes love doesn't arrive the way we expect it. Sometimes it comes with tears, with scars, with a child in your arms and a past you can't escape. But true love, the kind that lasts, doesn't ask where you've been. It only asks where you want to go together. Because family isn't just who you're born to. It's who chooses to stay, even when the rest of the world walks away. This has been another story from Heart of the Guardians, where every heart has a home, and every love story deserves to be told. If you felt something in this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes, the stories we tell remind us of the love we still believe in.